Good day. Welcome to SOW 301, Study Session 2. Communication Process. Introduction. In this study session, we will examine communication process, the process of encoding and decoding. Encoding is the process in which the source's message or purpose in form of the message is expressed. When a source uses verbal symbol and offers something as speech, the process of encoding takes place. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Explain the communication process. 2. Discuss the endless nature of communication process. 1. Concept of communication process. The concern with communication has produced many attempts to develop models of the process. Descriptions, listing ingredients. Of course, these models differ. None can be said be right or true. Some may be more useful than others. We have already examined 3 communication ingredients: the speaker, the speech, and the audience. Most of the current communication models are similar to that, though somewhat more complex. Shannon and Weaver model of communication. Transmitter, receiver, encoded signal, decoder, destination. Shannon, a mathematician and electrical engineer, discovers this while talking about electronic communication art. Other scientists have found the Shannon-Weaver model more useful in describing human communication. Examine the Morse substitute microphone for encoder and earphone for decoder, and you will be talking about electronic communication. At another breath, consider that the source and encoder are one person. Decoder and destination is another, and the signal is gauge, and you are talking about human communication. We say that all human communication has source, some person or persons with a purpose, a reason for engaging in communication. He has needs and intentions of communication. Encoder takes the ideas of the source and puts them in code. In person-to-person communication, encoding function is performed by motor skill of the source. Its vocal mechanism or muscle mechanism, which produce written words or features, or other muscle systems, which promotes gestures or posture. Message, the ideas, the purposes, and the intentions of source. Decoder, just as a source needs an encoder to translate purposes into a message to express purpose code, the receiver needs a decoder to retranslate, to decode the message and put it into a form that the receiver can use. We can look at the decoder as the set of sensory skills of the receiver. Receiver, the destination, the person or persons at the other end, the target of communication. After all, what we talk, somebody must listen. When we write, somebody must read. Perhaps the most important thing about the communication system, as we have been talking about, is the fact the receiver and the sender must always be in tune. Let us redraw our diagram, the Shannon-Weaver model, in a very simple form, like this. Schramm model of communication. Source, destination. Think of these circles as the accumulated experience of the individuals trying to communicate. The source can encode and the destination can decode messages only in terms of the experience each has had. Messages are made up of signs. A sign is a signal that stands for something in experience. If we have never learned any French, we can neither code nor decode in that language. Every individual is both an encoder and a decoder. Each person in the communication process is both an encoder and a decoder. He receives and transmits. He must be able to write readable shorthand and to read other people's shorthand. Therefore, it is possible to describe either sender or receiver in a human communication system. Thus, decoder, interpreter, encoder. What happens when a signal comes to you? Remember that it comes in the form of a sign. If you have learnt the signs, you must have learnt certain responses with it. These responses are the meaning the sign has for you, and they are learned from experience. A sign that means certain things to you will start certain other processes in your nerves and muscles. In other words, meaning that results from your decoding of a sign will start you encoding. But exactly what you encode will depend on your choice of the responses available in the situation and connection with the meaning. 2. Endless nature of the communication process. The process described in the above paragraph is what everyone is constantly engaged in. You are constantly deciding signs from your environment, interpreting these signs and encoding something as a result. In fact, it is misleading to think of the communication process as starting somewhere and ending somewhere. It is usually endless. We can accurately see the endless nature of communication as passing through us, chained, to be sure, by our interpretations, our habits, our abilities and capabilities. But the input is still being reflected in the output. Consider what happens in a conversation between two people. One is constantly communicating back to the other. Thus, message, encoder, interpreter, decoder. Message, decoder, interpreter, encoder. The return process is called feedback, and it plays a very important part in communication because it tells us how our messages are being interpreted. Does the hearer say, yes, yes, that's right, as we try to persuade him? Does he nod his head in agreement? Does a puzzled frown appear on his forehead? Does he look away as though he were losing interest? All these are feedback. So is a letter to the editor of a newspaper protesting an editorial. So is an answer to a letter. So is the applause of a lecture by the audience. An experienced communicator is attentive to feedback and constantly modifies his messages in the light of what he observes in or hears from his audience. Study session summary. In this study session, you learned that message is the idea being communicated. The speech that a person makes or writing sent to others could be seen as a message. A message is also seen as a symbolic code, such as language or gesture made by a sender to a receiver. The message only goes on to acquire a meaning when a receiver properly decodes it. End of study session 2. Thank you for listening.